6 Rare Traits That Make You More Valuable Than Gold After 65. Have you ever noticed how some people become more admired, more respected, and even more cherished as they age, while others seem to fade into the background? It's not about wealth, it's not about status, and it's certainly not about luck. The truth is, after 65, there are certain rare traits that quietly turn a person into someone truly irreplaceable, someone others gravitate toward, listen to, and deeply respect. But here's the problem. Most people unknowingly let these traits slip away, and when that happens, something subtle but heartbreaking takes place. Conversations become shorter, invitations become fewer, and before they realize it, they start feeling invisible. But this doesn't have to be your story. In this video, we're uncovering 6 powerful traits that will make you not just liked, but truly valued, the kind of person whose presence is felt, whose wisdom is sought, and whose company is treasured. The best part? These traits aren't about genetics or luck. They're about simple but powerful shifts that anyone can cultivate. So stay with me, because the final trait is something most people overlook until it's too late. Let's begin. 1. The ability to stay calm in any situation. The ancient Stoics believed that true strength lies not in controlling others, but in mastering oneself. As Epictetus once said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And this is a lesson I learned the hard way, long before I had the silver hair to match my years. I remember a man named Walter Evans, a proud 78-year-old veteran who had spent his life standing tall. But in his later years, the world around him began to change in ways he never expected. His children, once eager for his advice, were now too busy. The values he grew up with seemed to fade in the younger generation. Even in his own neighborhood, the sense of community that once existed had turned into a world of closed doors and quiet indifference. One afternoon, while sipping coffee at his favorite diner, Walter witnessed something that tested every fiber of his patience. A young man no older than 25 stormed in, furious over a minor mistake in his order. He shouted at the waitress, a woman in her 60s, with tired eyes and hands that had served meals for decades. His voice was sharp, his anger out of proportion, and his words cut through the air like a knife. Walter felt the old fire rise within him. His first instinct was to stand up, to teach that young man a lesson in respect. But then he remembered something his father had told him during his army days. The strongest man in the room is the one who can hold his temper when it's easiest to lose it. So Walter did something different. He called the waitress over and, with a calm and steady voice, asked, "Has anyone told you today that you're doing a great job?" The young man turned, momentarily stunned, as if he hadn't expected someone to acknowledge her at all. The waitress, caught off guard, smiled, her face softening in a way that seemed to erase years of exhaustion. Walter then turned to the young man and said, "Son, the way you handle small problems will determine how life handles you. You don't want to be the guy who can't control his own emotions. That's no way to live." The young man's face shifted. He muttered an apology and left the diner quieter than he came in. That day, Walter didn't just calm a room. He changed it. He didn't meet anger with anger. He didn't let emotions control him. Instead, he did what few people in today's world seem to do anymore. He chose patience, wisdom, and strength over unnecessary conflict. And you know what? That moment stayed with him far longer than any argument ever could. Now I ask you, how do you respond when life tests your patience? Have you ever found yourself in a situation where staying calm made all the difference? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your wisdom on this. 2. A sense of curiosity that never fades. Socrates once said, "An unexamined life is not worth living." The wisest among us are not those who claim to have all the answers, but those who never stop asking questions. Curiosity is the flame that keeps the mind sharp, the spirit young, and the soul deeply connected to the world. I remember a woman named Margaret Dawson, a retired librarian who had spent her whole life surrounded by books, but never stopped searching for more. At 81, she was the type of person who could talk to anyone about anything. She had an energy that made people lean in when she spoke, but what made Margaret remarkable wasn't just her knowledge. It was her willingness to learn from anyone, at any time, about anything. One day, I found her sitting at a park bench, hunched over her phone, with an expression of deep concentration. I chuckled and asked, "Margaret, what are you up to?" She looked up, eyes twinkling. "I'm learning Spanish," she said matter-of-factly. "Figured it was about time," I laughed. "At 81? She nodded. "Why not? My grandson married a woman from Mexico, and I don't want to sit at family gatherings smiling like I don't understand a word they're saying. I want to know them, their stories, their humor. What's the point of having a brain if you stop feeding it?" That was Margaret. She didn't fear the world changing around her. She leaned into it. She refused to be one of those people who complained about kids these days while shutting herself off from new ideas. When her doctor told her that learning new skills could help protect her memory and slow cognitive decline, she took it as a challenge, and so she took up the piano. She started watching history documentaries on streaming services instead of old reruns. She even joined a social media group just to debate classic literature with strangers from around the world, but not everyone understood her. Her old friends would shake their heads and say, "Why bother at this age?" And Margaret would reply, "Because life isn't over just because I have a few more wrinkles. The day I stop learning is the day I start dying." The last time I saw her, she was holding a well-worn book in one hand and a smartphone in the other, flipping between pages and an article on the latest scientific discovery. I remember thinking, this is what aging well looks like, not just surviving but thriving, not retreating into the past but embracing the present and future. Margaret taught me something that day. We don't lose curiosity because we get old. We get old because we lose curiosity. Now let me ask you, what is something new you've learned recently? Or is there something you've always wanted to explore but haven't yet? Share it in the comments. Let's keep each other inspired to keep learning, no matter our age. 3. The strength to set boundaries without guilt. The ancient philosopher Lao Tzu once said, "Care about what other people think and you will always be their prisoner." There is great wisdom in that. For much of my life, I believed that being a good person meant always being available, always saying yes, always putting others first. But with time I learned a hard truth. If you don't set boundaries, the world will take more from you than you can afford to give. I once knew a woman named Helen Carter, a retired nurse who had spent her life taking care of others. At 72 she still carried that same instinct, always the first to help, always putting everyone else's needs ahead of her own. Her son would call her at all hours, expecting her to drop everything to watch his kids, even when she was exhausted. Her friends leaned on her as if she were their personal therapist, unloading their problems while never asking how she was doing. Even in her church group, she found herself being volunteered for tasks no one else wanted, baking for events, organizing fundraisers, cleaning up after gatherings, because everyone knew Helen wouldn't say no. One afternoon she sat in her doctor's office, feeling constantly drained, struggling with high blood pressure and stress migraines. Her doctor, a woman half her age but full of wisdom, looked at her and said, "Helen, when was the last time you did something for yourself?" Helen blinked, unsure how to answer. The doctor sighed. "Your body is telling you what your mind refuses to accept. You are pouring from an empty cup." That conversation stayed with Helen. She went home, sat in her favorite chair and asked herself a question she had never truly considered. Why am I so afraid to say no? The answer came in pieces. She feared disappointing others. She feared being seen as selfish. She feared that if she stopped giving, people would stop needing her. But then another thought crept in. If people only value me because I say yes to everything, do they really value me at all? And so Helen made a decision, one that changed everything. The next time her son called last minute for babysitting, she kindly but firmly said, "I can't tonight, but I'd love to plan something ahead of time." When her friend began another long-winded rant about her problems, Helen interrupted gently and said, "I love you, but I can't always be the one to carry your burdens." When her church group tried to sign her up for yet another task, she smiled and said, "I've done my share. It's time for someone else to step up." At first, people resisted. Some pulled away, others complained. But something else happened too. Helen felt lighter. Her headaches lessened, her sleep improved, and most importantly, she discovered something beautiful. The people who truly cared about her respected her boundaries, and the ones who didn't had only been using her all along. That's the thing about setting boundaries. It's not about shutting people out, It's about making sure the right people stay in. It's about teaching others how to treat you by the way you treat yourself. So let me ask you, have you ever struggled with setting boundaries? Have you ever felt guilty for putting yourself first? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. 4. A presence that brings warmth and comfort. The great poet Maya Angelou once said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." There is a kind of presence in this world that doesn't demand attention, yet it draws people in like a warm fire on a cold night. Some call it kindness, others call it grace. I call it a presence that makes people feel safe. I once knew a man named Frank Holloway, an 82-year-old retired school principal. He wasn't the loudest person in the room, but somehow people always gravitated toward him. It wasn't because he had all the answers. It was because when you spoke to Frank, you felt like you mattered. One evening at the local diner, I watched him in action. A young waitress, probably no older than 20, was having a rough shift. She dropped a tray, spilling coffee all over the floor, and immediately her face flushed with embarrassment. A man at the counter rolled his eyes, muttering something about kids these days, and a few impatient customers huffed. But Frank leaned forward, looked at her, and said in his slow, deliberate voice, "You know, I dropped a whole tray of spaghetti once when I was your age. Thought my boss was going to fire me on the spot." The girl looked at him, blinking away tears, and then, despite herself, she let out a small, relieved laugh. "Really?" she asked. Frank nodded. "Oh yes, and you know what? I never made that mistake again. So don't worry, you just got that lesson out of the way early." The entire mood at the counter shifted, the tension eased, the people who had been so quick to judge softened, all because Frank, with his calm presence, had chosen compassion over criticism. I learned something that day. There is a kind of strength in gentleness. In a world that rushes, judges, and demands, there is something truly rare about a person who makes others feel safe. A person who listens without interrupting, who gives kindness without expecting anything in return, who sees beyond mistakes and into the hearts of people. Frank taught me that the greatest impact you can have on others isn't about being the smartest, the richest, or the most successful. It's about being a person others can exhale around. A person who, without even saying much, makes the world feel just a little less harsh. Now I ask you, have you ever met someone whose presence made you feel at home, even in the middle of a storm? If so, share your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear about the Franks in your life. 5. The ability to find joy in simplicity. The great American writer Henry David Thoreau once said, "Wealth is the ability to fully experience life." Yet in today's world, too many people spend their years chasing more money, more possessions, more validation, only to realize too late that happiness was never in the chase, but in the pause. I once knew a man named Tom Whitaker, a retired truck driver who lived in a small town just outside Nashville. He wasn't rich, wasn't famous, and if you passed him on the street you might not have noticed him. But to those who knew him, he had a kind of peace that made life feel lighter just by being around him. Tom's mornings were slow and intentional. He'd wake up before sunrise, make himself a cup of coffee, and sit on his front porch watching the sky turn from dark blue to soft pink. He didn't scroll through his phone, didn't rush to check the news. Instead, he let the cool morning air settle around him and listened to the birds, the wind, the distant sound of cars heading to work. He said it reminded him that life, in all its chaos, still had moments of stillness if you paid attention. One afternoon, I found him at the town's old diner, cutting into a slice of apple pie as if it were the best meal he had ever tasted. I laughed. "Tom, you eat that like it's a 5-star meal." He looked up and smiled. "Son, do you know how many people rush through a meal and never really taste it? They eat while staring at a screen, thinking about what's next, never realizing that one day they'll wish they had just stopped and savored the moment." That stuck with me, because he was right. People spend so much time thinking about what's missing that they forget to appreciate what's already there. They complain about what they don't have instead of enjoying what they do. Tom had arthritis in his hands, and the doctor had warned him that with time, simple tasks, like gripping a fork or holding a coffee cup, might become harder. But instead of feeling bitter, he told me, "That's why I enjoy every meal now. Because I can, because one day I might not be able to." I realized then that Tom wasn't just lucky to be happy, he had chosen to be. And that's the difference. The happiest people aren't the ones who have the most, they're the ones who appreciate what they have, over and over again. Now I ask you, what's one small thing in your day that brings you quiet joy? A cup of coffee? A favorite song? The sound of the rain? Share it in the comments. Let's remind each other that life's richest moments aren't in the chase, they're in the pause. 6. A deep sense of self-respect that no one can shake. The philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson once wrote, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." And I tell you, nothing is more important, especially as you age, than knowing your worth and standing firm in it. I once knew a woman named Elaine Monroe, a 79-year-old widow who had spent most of her life being everything to everyone. She was the woman who never said no. If someone needed a ride, she gave it. If someone needed a favor, she handled it. If there was an argument, she played peacekeeper, even at the cost of her own feelings. And for decades she thought that was what made her a good person. But over time, something changed. Her body started to feel the toll. Constant fatigue, joint pain that her doctor called stress-induced inflammation, and a quiet sadness she couldn't quite name. It wasn't just physical. She felt unseen, unheard, like she had spent her whole life making others comfortable, but had never once asked herself, "What about me?" The moment that changed everything happened at a family gathering. Her son had called her last minute, expecting her to cook for 20 people. As usual, she said yes, even though she was already tired. She spent the whole afternoon preparing food, her knees aching, her back stiff, her hands cramping. But when dinner was served, no one thanked her. No one even noticed. They ate, they laughed, they talked over her, and when it was time to clean up, they left it all for her to do. That night, as she stood at the sink washing dishes alone, she finally saw it. She had spent her whole life teaching people that her needs didn't matter, so she made a decision. The next time her son called with last-minute demands, she said, "No, I won't be able to do that." He was shocked. "But Mom, you always help." She smiled and replied, "That was my mistake." She started prioritizing her own well-being. She went to a water aerobics class to help with her joint pain. She set boundaries with people who only took from her. And do you know what happened? The people who truly loved her adjusted. They started valuing her time, respecting her space, because when she respected herself, others followed. Elaine taught me something that day. Self-respect isn't selfish. It's necessary. When you stop apologizing for putting yourself first, when you stop letting people take advantage of your kindness, you don't lose people. You lose the ones who never valued you in the first place. Now tell me, have you ever had a moment when you realized you needed to put yourself first? Share your story in the comments. Let's remind each other that our worth is not up for debate. As we come to the end of this video, take a moment to reflect. These 6 rare traits aren't about wealth, status, or how the world sees you. They're about how you see yourself and how you choose to walk through life. The truth is, the most cherished people aren't the ones who shout the loudest or demand attention. They are the ones who move with wisdom, kindness, and quiet confidence. And here's the best part. It's never too late to cultivate these traits. No matter where you are in life, no matter what you've been through, you have the power to shape the person you become. If any of these lessons resonated with you, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your experiences, and the ways you've embraced these qualities in your own life. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing so we can continue this journey together. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.